Well, Chris Codger, just one person. If you heard the last segment, just one person willing to come forward of many to talk about what happened in the past with sexual abuse by priests. I don't think we need to forget about it. I don't think we should move on. If what he's saying is true, and I believe him, I think Bishop Pella should step down. Am I right or am I wrong? 578-1100 in the 216 area code. I think he needs to resign. That's an important issue. Focus on things like that. Don't focus on issues like Madeleine Albright, the has-been lady, telling us what we should be doing and what we're doing right and wrong. Who cares? There's still stories in the wire. Cardinal Law out of Boston issued a letter defending his supervision of priests. He distributed a letter to parishes today. Law said he was not aware of sexual abuse allegations against Reverend Paul Shanley until 1993. Law said immediately afterward, Shanley's authorization to serve as a priest was rescinded. Records released earlier this year showed the Archdiocese knew of abuse claims against Stanley as far back as 1967. Continued to transfer him. Law arrived in Boston in 1984. How many times did this happen? 10, 20, 100, 1,000? Unbelievable. Church officials were also aware that Shanley had spoken out in favor of sex, in favor of sex between men and boys. Law said he only became aware of these accusations a few months ago. Crap. That's what I say. You're lying. You're lying. He offered apologies for past errors in judgment and acknowledged that he has become, for some, an object of contempt. No, really? An object of contempt? The higher you go up the ladder in the chain of command, the more people know and the more people don't say anything about it. God help us all. And I know most Catholics, good people, and I know most priests, wonderful people. We're talking about 1/2 of 1%, but we're also talking about affecting the rest of somebody's life. Little kids, little children. If it happens once, that's bad enough. And maybe it's your responsibility, whether you want to talk about it or not, to come forward. If it happened to you and you never said anything. Maybe it's your responsibility now, so that it doesn't happen to other children. The only way you can find out if you got the cockroaches in your house is if you turn the light on. And you see them scurry, and then you call an exterminator. Otherwise, you didn't even know you had them. But I flipped the light on one night in the kitchen, and I saw bugs running around. And that's what these pedophile priests are. They're vermin. They're like cockroaches. They're like silverfish in robes. They're parasites. And their hosts are little boys and little girls. And it's sickening. It's disgusting. They somehow get their thrills. Jerry, you're on the air.
Hey, Gilly, how you doing tonight?
Okay.
This situation bothers me on a deeper level not because I was ever in a situation that some folks have been in, but I'm 26-year-old man. Up until I was 19 years of age, I thought that I wanted to be a priest, and I just realized that I probably wasn't strong enough to lead the lifestyle that you have to commit to if you're one of those people who become a priest because you actually want to help people and be there for people, and I knew that I probably would not be able to do that. And I figure, knowing myself well enough, knowing that I wouldn't be able to fulfill that lifestyle, I wouldn't be doing anybody else any good if I went through with it. But what bothers me the most about this situation is, look at it this way, Gilly. If, say, somebody is a murderer and they admit that they've murdered somebody, and you protect them, and you give them, safe harbor, aren't you, in the eyes of the law, just as guilty? Well, this bishop who is protecting an admitted child molester, who signed essentially a confession saying he did it, in my eyes, he's just as guilty as this man, if not more so. Because like they were saying, who's more disgusting, who's more disturbing, the person who commits these acts or the person who protects them? And I don't understand why the legal system doesn't step in as much. I mean, why are, and again, I'm still a practicing Catholic, and I still give respect to bishops and the Pope. Why is this even their decision? Why are they even being given a choice of what to do?
Jerry, in the legal system, one would say what they're doing is aiding and abetting.
Oh, that's the exact term I was looking for. And I hate these blind fools who say, well, it's separation of church and state. It is in the Bible where, Jesus says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar, give unto God what is God's. Separation of church and state is merely another crutch that these criminals, is what they are using to try to hide on. And it just dumbfounds me that these people are even being given the choice, why the legal system is even giving them the option of, well, we'll move this priest or whatever, and that will be the punishment. Maybe you could explain that to me, Gilly. Why is that even an option?
I don't know. Think about it this way. I don't know what you do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
But don't you think that if you were accused of molesting a child, that you would lose your job, that you would be in prison? I know that would happen to me. Do you think they'd transfer me to a different radio station in a different city? I don't think so.
Absolutely not. And I think the problem is society, for whatever reason, has a hard time coming down on these priests. They don't want to admit that this is possible. It's just another case of, and you see it everywhere you go, Gilly. You see it when a child, well, let's use this, what are they called now? The WWE. They're not the WWF anymore. Every time some child attacks another child and does something to them physically, the WWF is on trial right alongside them because, he learned it from watching this or something. Society never wants to point the finger where it belongs. They never want to point it at who the actual fault is. And it's disturbing, and it's absolutely disgusting. That's all I had to say, Gilly.
All right, let's think about this. Something I'd never considered. Here you're talking about ephebophilia, pedophilia. Let's stick with pedophilia. I believe ephebophilia is molesting a child who has reached puberty. Let's stick with pedophilia. Here you're talking about, and let's say, for example, an 8-year-old boy who has no idea about sex or sexuality. He's raped anally, raped by a priest. What do you think's going to happen to that kid when he reaches adolescence? And most all people have had some experimentation sexually in their teen years. Just curious, but they turn out okay. Maybe you don't turn out okay because of what happened with Father McBugger, the Reverend O'Feeler. Maybe you don't turn out okay. Maybe you get to those confusing teen years, and then you're really confused because you've had years and years and years to think about an act of sex years before you ever should have been thinking about sex. You're 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, and you're thinking, is that normal? Was that right? Was that bad? Didn't seem right. Could you even tell your friends it happened? Oh my God, this happened. If you said it to one person and they said, what are you talking about? No, that's not normal. How does that register in the mind of a child? Hell, at 14, there's some guys like Chris Codger who are smart enough and big enough and fast enough to get away. At 14, some people can't get away, apparently. And as Chris said earlier, if someone would, as God is chasing you around the house after he tries to violate you with his hand, and we know what was next. Well, you're not the first one. And if this guy chased you around the house and you have to steal his car to get away, odds are he wants that pretty badly, doesn't he? He's got a pretty strong desire to rape little boys. Now Bishop Pilla says the same evening, what do we have to do to keep you quiet until morning? And there's a settlement that involves cash. Don't talk about it. Be quiet. It didn't happen. Go away. And 6 months later, the same priest shows up in your parish. There's something really, really base, on a base level, there's something really wrong here. And this happened in the early 80s? How many times did it happen in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s, in the 30s, in the 20s? I'll bet you there's people out there within the sound of my voice, and I hate to dredge up memories and make you feel really sad and unhappy. There could be people out there in their 80s, their 70s, their 60s, that old, that have had to try and block out memories of something that was done to them as a child. Because it's been going on for a long, long, long time. Don't you figure back in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s? There was no TV. There was no radio. There was no outlet for someone like Chris Codger to tell hundreds and millions and thousands, just how many people you can reach with a medium like this and like television and newspapers to try and enlighten people in the world of what's going on and what's happening. Didn't happen back then. What are you going to do? Word of mouth? How many people do you know? How many people do you know that you could use word of mouth to try and badmouth the Catholic Church? How dare you? How sacrilegious of you. How dare you say anything bad about Father McFeely? How dare you? He's closer to God than you. Is he really? Everyone knows how strong sexual desires are, don't they? Did he really join the priesthood to take a vow of poverty and celibacy and help people? Maybe. Or did he look at it as a little garden of buttocks? I'll be able to get away with this. Puts them in a position of authority, doesn't it? You're a professional. Everyone gives professional, especially priests, a free pass, the utmost of respect, don't they? It's a man of the cloth, a holy man. You don't dare badmouth these people, do you? Don, you're on the air.
Hey, Gilly, how you doing?
All right.
I listened to that guy and about what happened. It's beyond terrible what happened, but I failed to hear him mention anything about why his parents didn't come out to the police or say anything to the police about what happened to him.
Because they called Bishop Pilla. And they figured that Bishop Pilla would fix the problem, and Bishop Pilla fixed the problem by trying to transfer this guy around and move him around, and I think Bishop Pilla, look, I believe in God. I think Bishop Pilla is a man before he was a priest, before he was a bishop. He's a man. Maybe he's a great man. Maybe he was never involved in anything like this, but got caught in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. I don't care. People's heads need to roll, don't you think? I think if somebody did this, they need to resign.
Well, absolutely, but my main concern here is, the parents call Bishop Pilla, but don't they tend to think now that maybe he was the wrong person to call? No,
they figured he was the right person to call. I don't understand it either. I know what you're saying. I don't understand it either.
Wouldn't you want to put maybe some of the, if I was a kid, I'd be pretty upset at my parents. I can understand if they didn't want to say anything to protect their kid, from what happened, but I think that there's a greater good to be done
with going to the authorities about this because, you know, like you said, how many more children were affected by either this individual alone or by somebody else? And, you know, there's always that greater good to be done, and there's always a sacrifice to make. And I didn't, from what I understood, they didn't make it.
Well, serious problems. Don't call the bishop. Don't call the diocese. Call the police. That's what you need to do. Obviously, calling the diocese isn't going to do anything to fix the problem. Chuck, you're on the air.
Rick.
Hello?
Yeah, Rick, I don't buy it.
Pardon me?
I don't buy the story.
You don't believe it?
He said he was 14 at one point, then he said he was 17.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I follow. Did Nate, good board up, Nate, did he say he was 17 at one point? I don't recall. Chris,
I didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that either. I don't recall Chris Codger saying he was 17. Obviously, he was 17 at one point. I recall him saying I asked him what he did with his life, and he told me where he went at certain ages in his life and that sort of thing. I don't recall him say. I believe his story. If you don't believe it, let's get the paperwork, right? Now, I don't care what channel it is on TV. Do you think they're going to air a story that this guy just made up? You think they're just going to make it up? You think this guy's going to come all the way from Alaska just to make up a story? Looking at Nate, and I don't understand. What's the face you're making? Turn on your microphone. What are you thinking?
There's a lot of questions I have. They asked, you asked what year it happened, and he couldn't remember that right offhand. What he said to you was verbatim what he said on the TV. It was almost like he was reading it. You know what I mean? And you know what? And I could be wrong, and I could be full of it, and I could be so jaded that it is unhealthy. But I don't buy all of it. You know what I'm saying? I don't get the emotion.
I did.
I didn't.
I can't even believe that we're sitting here debating whether or not it was the truth. Isn't there paperwork somewhere to prove this? Like I said, we're not affiliated with Fox TV 8 or whatever.
Right.
But do you really think that a television station would go on the air and have a picture of the priest and have his name and everything on there? I mean, wouldn't you think that they'd be worried about libel?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. You're damn right they'd be worried about it, so they wouldn't air a story like that without checking it out first, would they? I don't care if this guy has to tell his story 21 years later. I don't expect him to be an actor. I don't expect him to... the emotion that he showed when he called here yesterday was enough to convince me. I could tell immediately the switch in the phone call from his reaction to the gun laws here in Ohio, and all of a sudden when it got into the talking about the priests. You could feel it. I felt it right away.
I didn't feel it at all.
Well, I felt it yesterday. You weren't here.
Okay.
I got an immediate gut feeling. Immediately. Just got a gut, like that.
You got a gut.
Not a very big one. I'm down to 147.
You suck.
Oh, okay. Mike, you're on the air.
Rick,
Yes.
I don't doubt that Chris had a problem and a lot of other people had problems, but I'd like to relay a quick story to you. I have a neighbor who was a principal at a local high school.
Let me put you on hold here just a second because I'll get in trouble. Did I give you the triple Doppler forecast from TV3 meteorologist Mike Stone? I've been slacking off because I got so involved with this. But tonight, some rain or snow possible, low between 30 and 35 with a frost advisory along the lake. Currently 43 degrees. Tomorrow will be a nicer day, 49 for a high. Not too bad. At least it won't be raining. Anyway, go right ahead, please.
Okay, I have a neighbor who was a principal in a local high school, and I mean, this guy was great in the community, no problems. He helped everybody whenever he could, great family. All of a sudden, one day, in the plain dealer is that he is accused of sexually assaulting 2 girls at his school. Well, he's suspended. They go on with an investigation, blah, 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 this and that. Turns out the girls were lying.
Well, I understand that there are people that come forward that are just trying to get cash. But this cash was already gotten way back in the 80s in Christopher Codger's case. How many cases never came forward? I want to thank you for calling. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank Nate, the man who pulls the strings and pushes the buttons and dials and keeps this program on track. And you'll keep it tuned right here for, an interesting song to describe sort of the abuse by priests and important words and coverage of what in the world's happening, and then Dreamland here on Cleveland's only news radio station, WTAM 1100.
Dominus and Regium, in os centos molestus, Dominus and Regium, every restitution, except our resignation, hypocriticum, trying to lead the flock with the wrong kind of rod and staff, persecution, oh, I've said.